Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg, and this is going to be the first in hopefully a monthly series from now on, in which I do a top 10 list, which is all very in vogue right now. And since it is the month of October, which is the month of horror, I have already done a top 10 list of my favorite horror movies. You can go check that out already. So I decided to do the top 10 found footage horror movies. Slightly different. So I'm going to be real honest right up front. I like to be honest with people. This list was actually not that easy to make. Found footage horror movies get a lot of crap because there's just a large majority of crap out there. And so when I first thought about doing the list, I was like, oh, that'll be easy. You know, I've seen a lot of them. But really, to put out just a top 10 list of found footage horror movies that I can really recommend to people, it was a little tricky. I did get up to 10, but some of the ones, like my number 1, I'm very secure with. My number 2, I'm pretty damn secure with. But as it goes down, like, 10, 9, 8, they could be hit or miss. So take that with a grain of salt. So, the other thing is defining a found footage horror movie. I actually had a little discussion about this with my friends, and we decided that a found footage film is one in which the camera itself has a narrative element to it. So for most films, the camera is just kind of this thing that is present there, but that nobody really acknowledges. It has no story thing. It's just our viewpoint into the situation. With found footage, the camera is physically there. It has a presence, and the characters, and it is part of the situation. So I was actually going to put the movie Buried on this list, even though it's not really a horror movie, although that's kind of up for debate, starring Ryan Reynolds, but I decided against it because it is not a found footage movie. Because the camera, it's more of a traditional camera setup. There's no actual physical camera in there in the coffin with him. But I digress. So let's get to the list as it is. Number 10 is Unfriended from 2014, although released theatrically in 2015. So this is the most recent movie on the list. This is a really interesting one, and I partly put it on here just because of how novel it was. I thought it was an okay movie, but the fact that most of the film, if not, well, I guess all of the film takes place just recording the screen from a computer, which is really, based on my definition that I just gave of found footage, is kind of weird, but it also works because, like, narratively, the footage that we're watching has been found. That's kind of the point of it, although I don't know why exactly it was being recorded the entire time, but anyways. So it's a very interesting one. You probably have seen the trailers for it if you've been to a theater this year. But a group of teenagers who apparently bullied a girl into committing suicide like to have Skype video calls together. And one night, on the anniversary of her suicide, things start to get a little strange. And so you're seeing the entire film through just the recording of a computer screen, which they could have done very lamely, okay? They could have done it just like old school kind of computer screens where it's just like nobody has a computer that looks like this. This is ridiculous. But no, it's all pretty damn authentic. Like, you see Facebook pages, you see Spotify, you see Skype as it is. Like, everything kind of looks how it looks. It's all pretty damn authentic. There are, I think, some parts where it's like that's probably just a made-up thing that they put in the movie for narrative reasons. But overall, yeah, it looks like you're just watching somebody on their computer. And for that reason, it is a very interesting film. The story-wise, okay, it's not anything groundbreaking. But the way that it's presented is good enough to make number 10. Number 9 is Home Movie from 2008. this is an interesting one. It is filmed very much in the vein of a home movie, as in something that, you know, your family would just have like a camcorder laying around and they would just record, you know, the family. So it's recorded in that sense, but that's not really that novel, because that's kind of the whole point of all these found footage movies, is they're kind of, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are meant to be kind of in that vein. But this one really chose to go for that. The story is about a family, the Poe family, and the mother and father are seemingly very cool and nice and funny people, and they seem really genuine. They were living out in kind of the countryside, and they have 2 kids who are basically freaks. You realize that right from the get-go. They're pretty much freaks, and things start to get worse and worse with these kids as they become like even more antisocial and more strange. And so the real draw of the film is the way that these 2 parents handle these kids. The father is a Lutheran pastor, and the mother is a psychiatrist. And so the mother is looking at this from a very scientific point of view and trying to prescribe medication and traditional therapy and things like that to try and crack the case, whereas the father believes that they are possessed by demons. And so you have these 2 complete, like, literally, they couldn't be more opposite of their thought processes for how to deal with these very strange problem children. And really neither one is adequate. And so it's one of those movies where you're not really sure if something supernatural is going on. Like, you're not really sure if there's a possession going on or if they're just really strange, you know. And as things start to get even more darker and more grim, it's like, you know, who's in the right here? Why neither one of these methods are working? And so I won't spoil the ending for you, but it is pretty interesting. It's an interesting film that kind of looks at, you know, the kind of concept of evil as we would kind of define it, and how we're not really capable of fixing it. So, home movie, pretty solid, number 9. Number 8 is The Blair Witch Project from 1999. Okay, so found footage has been around for a while. Some would say that, like, Cannibal Holocaust from 1980 was one of the first really found footage horror movies, but it didn't really become popular until 1999 with The Blair Witch Project. I'm sure you're all aware of this. The Blair Witch Project has been kind of lampooned and parodied and all sorts of things like that many, many times over the years, to the point where people don't really care about it anymore just because they think it's kind of a joke. But it's not really. Blair Witch Project is not a perfect film. That's why it's only number 8. However, it's the lengths that it went to be to appear genuine kind of almost surpasses everything else. I mean, this was a movie that plenty of people believed was real footage. And nothing like that has really happened since, or probably ever will again. I mean, it was, I don't know if it was on the same level as something like the War of the Worlds way back when, but there were plenty of people that believed this was real, were really freaked out. There's something to say about that. So Blair Witch Project, if you haven't seen it, is the story of 3 kind of college journalist students, I guess, who want to make a documentary film about this kind of folk legend in this rural area about the Blair Witch. And she apparently haunts these woods, and she abducts people or children or something like that, and she forces them to stand in a corner and stare at the corner while she, you know, like, kills the other captives, or, you know, something like that. I haven't seen it in a little while, but I'm paraphrasing. And so they kind of go through the nearby village of, I don't remember, it might have been Blair, I don't remember. It doesn't sound right, but it might be. They go through the nearby kind of rural village, and they do interviews with the locals, and they kind of hear their stories, and then they actually go into the woods. And that's where things kind of go wrong. Now, this is one of those where if you watch it now for the first time, I can see people not really enjoying it. It is very slow. It is a pretty slow film. There's a lot of arguing amongst the main characters. A character kind of, like, the map gets lost. They lose the map, and there's, like, a huge argument about that, and there's a lot of yelling and swearing and things like that. And it's just kind of like, okay, it's gone. Deal with it. So there's a lot of that, but then, they start to kind of just, they find, like a tongue or something, like, just sitting there in the woods, or, like, on, like, some cloth or something like that, and it's really strange. And then there's, of course, the famous scene that everybody parodies, where they're kind of running through the woods, and she's got the camera right in her face, and there are better found footage horror movies out there. Obviously, this is number 8, and I'm partly putting it on the list just because of how strong of a precedent it kind of set. It's not a movie that I'm going to continually rewatch, but I think it is a very important film for horror, for found footage horror, and there are some genuinely creepy moments in it. Especially the ending still kind of unnerves me a little bit. So there it is, Blair Witch Project. Number 7 is Creep from 2014. Okay, so Creep is the story of a videographer for hire, and he answers a Craigslist ad from a guy, and he wants somebody with a camera to come up to his kind of cabin in the woods and just do basic video recording for about 8 hours. That is pretty much apparently all the Craigslist ad said. And the videographer, in need of money, decides to accept it, and so he heads up there. And the man that he is recording is, from the onset, very strange. The creep, as it is, played by Mark Duplass, and he plays it very well. Very well. And so things start out just sort of kind of weird, but relatively innocuous. But they get progressively weirder, of course. And so this film is really carried by Mark Duplass himself as this kind of creepy, weirdo stranger, who, for the entire film, you get that vibe that, like, this guy is clearly a serial killer, an axe murderer, or something like that. But on the other hand, it's like, he's clearly he's troubled, he definitely has mental issues, and really nobody is helping this guy. And so you feel kind of conflicted. Like, you want to help the videographer, who's clearly he's not in a good situation here, but also you feel bad for this creep who has really no friends, no family that likes him at all, and he's just kind of isolated, and he has issues. In the end, you wouldn't want to be in that situation either. So you're gonna kind of support the videographer who wants to get the hell away from this. And the creep kind of starts somewhat stalking the videographer after the fact, and it's almost kind of like The Gift a little bit, which also came out this year. And you're kind of like, okay, this, like, he's not really doing anything violent. He's not like cutting him or breaking into his house or anything like that. Somewhat. But it's just, you wouldn't want to be in that situation, but you really, and you so you sort of feel these conflicting emotions, but it's still kind of, it's a somewhat mundane horror, It's a very kind of real horror, I guess, where this could absolutely happen. This people like this exist out there in groups. And so they definitely, Mark Duplass played a very somewhat real character. Scary, but real. And so it's one of those movies that, instead of something supernatural or, things like that, werewolves or blah, 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 that you that don't exist. I'm sorry. That don't exist. You have something that absolutely does, a very real, somewhat mundane terror. So, yeah, Creep, very entertaining. All right, number 6 is The Tunnel from 2011. So this was somewhat of an indie kind of Australian production that kind of made somewhat headlines because on release it very much embraced kind of BitTorrent. It was like one of the first. I don't know if it was like the first movie or the first Australian movie or something like that really embraced like legal BitTorrent sharing. But that, I don't know. That's kind of interesting. But anyways, The Tunnel is about this somewhat kind of a government cover-up because the Australian government was planning on siphoning out water from abandoned train tunnels underneath like Sydney. They had apparently millions of liters of water kind of trapped down under there in these abandoned train tunnels. And so the government was planning on taking all that water out, but then very quietly they abandoned the project without really giving a reason why. And so, of course, some intrepid journalists are very curious about this, and so they decide to go down into the tunnels to find out any possible reason why they would cover this up. As it stands, there was a very good reason why they covered this up. So this is a movie that, again, has somewhat kind of a slow burn at the start. You don't really get to any sort of intensity for quite a while. Which sometimes I mind, sometimes I don't. For The Tunnel, I don't really mind. But people love The Descent. And The Descent, like, nothing really happens for like 45 minutes, but people love that. So I don't really mind it in The Tunnel. So to me, I think it's one of the few movies on this list that I think could potentially really scare people. It has a very kind of brooding tension of being these characters kind of being stalked in these tunnels. And the tunnels themselves are kind of reminiscent of like the Parisian catacombs. It's very claustrophobically filmed. You have these very tight corners and corridors and these little small rooms that they go into, so it feels very cramped and claustrophobic. And they're kind of being stalked by these pretty much unseen entities. And so there are some sequences in the film where you have characters that are basically trying to like hide. And they're trying to be like completely silent, and you're just kind of sitting there very tense because, it's a horror movie. These characters are very possible to die, and so it's just kind of like, you kind of feel that tension because the camera is like right there, and you feel like these things just kind of moving around. It's pretty intense. So, yeah, I like The Tunnel because because of that claustrophobic atmosphere, and because I think it could potentially be scary to some people. Like, my scare threshold is way different from most people, so it's kind of hard for me to tell, but I feel like it would be somewhat scary. And it's a nice little indie production. The budget's not really high, and I think they did pretty well with what they had. Number 5 is Paranormal Activity from 2007. Okay, so Paranormal Activity, of course, takes a lot of flack. And it takes a lot of flack because it is popular. It's kind of with any of the horror series that gets popular with a number of sequels, people are going to kind of shit on it. Paranormal Activity, Saw, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, whatever. All these series just go past like 5 movies. Because they consistently make a lot of profit. People just kind of shit on it. And even I'm a little lukewarm on some of the Paranormal Activity sequels. Some of them just kind of seem to be going through the motions a little bit, and some of them kind of screw over other movies in the series. But the original, I think, is still one that we'll be talking about for quite a while. It's it's one of those just kind of landmark films in the horror genre that just kind of, you know, makes a name for itself. And much like Blair Witch Project, you know, you have kind of an unknown director with a very small budget kind of coming in and doing something that really nobody else has done before. So Paranormal Activity was good for a number of reasons. You have something that, you know, it showed a very... Well, demons. Okay, demons are not really that covered much, except in exorcism movies. But exorcism movies tend to go through the same kind of things, where you generally have a younger person, almost always a girl, that gets possessed, and there's, of course, the babbling in languages and bones and stuff like that, and things twisting and supernatural strength and blah, blah, blah. And it just kind of always seems the same, whereas Paranormal Activity took the concept of demons to a different level, where it had, you know, it had somewhat of a possession factor to it, but more so it was just kind of this presence within a house. But it wasn't a ghost, because ghosts, like, screw ghosts, what are they going to do? But an actual demon that has taken great interest in your house, that is a really scary concept. And so, you know, ghosts are kind of hit or miss with believability. Some people really believe in ghosts and really believe that they are a force to be reckoned with, but a lot of people just, you know, ghosts. But demons tap into more, well, ghosts somewhat, but demons much more tap into the, you know, religion and belief and things like that. And, you know, people will say, screw ghosts, but demons, you bring that in, it's like, oh man, I'm not going to touch that. And so you have a much more real, not real, but a much more terrifying threat. It also had... The reason that I like it, okay, the reason that it's on my list is because Paranormal Activity and its sequels, it was just the way that it's presented to me, okay? You have a camera, sometimes static, sometimes moving. I like it a lot when it's moving. You have a camera set up, and you just have these scenes playing out. And you're completely tuned in to everything that's going on in that scene. At least I am. When I'm watching one of those nighttime scenes where the camera's just going, I am like laser focused, scanning every inch of that, because I know that they like to do those things where they like to just put in these little movements or these little twitches or these little details that are just like, you know, and it's really, it's so cool. Some of the later sequels kind of laxed a little bit. They made it too obvious or something like that. But such nice touches when they make it work, and it's really freaking creepy. Even sometimes when it's more obvious, you know, when you're just watching this static scene and all of a sudden something just kind of starts shaking a little bit. It's so well done. I love it, and I wish more movies paid attention to detail like that when they're doing shots. So Paranormal Activity, yeah, it makes my list for that reason. The kind of attention to detail and each individual shot is really just engrossing. Number 4 is Afflicted from 2013. Okay, so Afflicted is a story of two guys who decide that they want to go on an around-the-world trip. They want to film themselves traveling around the world and experiencing everything that the world has to offer. And so one of the guys is very much like the adventurer. Like, he's the one that's going to be doing, like, mountain climbing and all that kind of stuff. And the other guy is just more kind of the cameraman, but they're best buds. But the adventurer guy has, I want to say AVM, it's called. It's some sort of brain disorder, some sort of tangle of blood vessels, something like that. He's got an issue. And so at any point, his blood vessels in his brain could just like pop and he could die. And so he wants to go on this adventure because he might not be able to at some point later. So they go on this trip, and it starts like the early part of the movie is really kind of like you feel like you're watching a different movie. Like you feel like this is not a horror movie. It's very humorously put together because it looks like sort of like a college. It's like something you'd watch on like Vimeo or something like that of these guys just going around. It's got all these little funny annotations. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it seems like a different movie. But then the adventurer guy starts coming down with an illness, and I really don't want to spoil too much about it. I really don't want to spoil too much about it because I want you to watch it, but I need to say something about it. So I guess he comes down with this illness, and at the start, you're not exactly sure what kind of illness it is. I mean, obviously, it's going to be something weird and unique that nobody else has. Of course, it's a horror movie, but you're not exactly sure what's going to happen to this guy. But then, as time goes on, as you start to see more symptoms that he is manifesting. It clicks for you. You know, you're like, that's what it is. Like, you know what it is, but the way that it's presented is very interesting. And so, man, like I can't even say why I like this movie so much without spoiling it. I guess I can try. So the movie kind of. It's not a fatal illness. I guess I'll say that. It's not a fatal illness. So, you know, the movie continues on as he tries to cope with this illness. And at some point the camera guy dies. I'll say that. And so it almost seems like the end of the movie when he dies. But that's like half the movie. So the second half is just the adventurer guy filming himself because he's like, you know, this is what he would have wanted, and like we need to document this. And so he's just on his own coping with this thing. And it's almost a horror action movie at times. Okay, there are some sequences in this where it is not horror at all. It is just kind of, it's almost like a Bourne movie, okay? It's action. But it's point of view. These action sequences are point of view, which I think is very underdone in the industry. Like, more action stuff should be done well in POV. And this movie does it well. Does it very well. Where it's just like, holy shit, you know, it's like Mirror's Edge or something like that. It's really cool. So, again, I can't really talk about it without spoiling it, so I just recommend checking it out. It's called Afflicted. It does not have a massive budget, and I think they did really well with what they had. Just a really interesting story. This is one that I'll be going back to. Afflicted. Number 3 is Grave Encounters from 2011. Okay, so Grave Encounters is the story of a small kind of production crew that is basically like Ghost Adventures or Ghost. I don't watch any of those shows, but you know those kind of crews that go into haunted places, and Ghost Adventures I think is the most well-known one, where they just go into a place and they have all their equipment and things like that, and they have their kind of charismatic host. And they try to call out the ghosts and try to get readings and present their findings and blah, blah, blah. So it's basically exactly that, but it's an actual horror movie. So shit goes down. And so you have the host of the show is this kind of charismatic guy. And it's displayed very early on. Like, he has like his kind of intro a la kind of Ghost Adventures where he's like, you know, I think his name is Sean Preston or something like that. Where he's like, you know, I experienced ghosts when I was 5 years old, and ever since then, you know, stuff like that, where he's like, you know, he's this hardcore believer. But then it's shown very early on that he doesn't believe in any of this shit, and they just kind of have faked all their stuff. Like, they pay off, like, one of the landscaping guys. They pay him, like, $15 to just say that he saw a scary ghost or something like that. It's really funny. And so it kind of pokes fun at all these shows that are about these people just going into these locations and faking all this stuff. However, they go into this kind of asylum, and they lock themselves in. So they actually have like the groundskeeper. They lock them in with like these heavy chains. They're locked in until like 6 a.m. or something, where they get released. And things, of course, go wrong, and they discover that they cannot leave. And so the reason that I like Grave Encounters is because, for one, it pokes fun at all these shows that I also poke fun at, because it's all bullshit. So it pokes fun at that, and I like that. Two, like, it seems realistic because of these shows that exist. You know, it very much is kind of presented like those shows at the start. Later on, it's, you know, shit goes down. And three is the way that it kind of presents the supernatural. Like, this is not just like ghosts messing with them or something like that. Like, this is like a supernatural hive of a location, you know, and things get really intense, and like I said, they can't escape. Like, they are like in a void, basically, and there is no way out. And so it's just really, it's really good. And it's a movie that I just keep going back to over and over because I just really like it. So I definitely recommend Grave Encounters. I don't recommend Grave Encounters 2, which is just kind of trash. So there you have it. Number 2 is The Bay from 2012. So I've talked about this movie a few times here and there. And The Bay is a movie about a small kind of Chesapeake Bay town and the events that take place there during a 4th of July festival. And it follows the perspective of a reporter who's just kind of there covering the festival. Like, she's just like a complete rookie. It shows from some other perspectives that are not strictly just like shaky cam or anything like that. There's more kind of like webcam stuff going on, and other video footage from like in the past, like before the festival happened. And the movie is about a disease or a virus or whatever that breaks out during the 4th of July festival, and it spreads very quickly, and it's very lethal, infectious, something. It's bad. It's a bad disease. And so you kind of follow this very rookie reporter who's just been thrown into this horrible, horrible mess that's way out of her league, and she's trying to cover it at first, but then later on she's just like, what are we doing? It follows the hospital talking to the CDC to try and figure out, you know, what the hell is this? It follows like marine biologists from some time prior, like kind of finding these weird discoveries in the Chesapeake Bay area. It follows like the mayor and the police and all these different perspectives. They try and figure out what is going on, how to deal with it, or just how to survive. And so it's a movie that just really clicked with me right away because, again, it's one of those things that's just kind of very real. I don't know if there is a possible disease that could spread this quickly and be this bad, but I don't work for the CDC, so I have no idea. So in my mind, sure, this could happen, and that's terrifying because basically it was spread through the water, like through the drinking water. And so, yeah, like really, these people, like pretty much everybody living in the village, in the town, drank this water. They had no idea, and it's like, yeah, you have no idea what's in your water. It could be killing you. It's not really. I don't think it's that preachy, although it is a little kind of preachy at times against kind of like big corporations and how they just don't care about the environment and blah. But it's not really about that because I wouldn't really like it then. It's just kind of very real, I guess, which is a term that I've been throwing around. So yeah, there's nothing really supernatural going on. It is literally just like an infectious disease set in kind of a mockumentary style. But damn, is it good. I really like The Bay. And finally, number 1, to the surprise of no one, is REC from 2007. So REC topped my top 10 horror movies of all time list. It is my favorite horror movie, so it was really a no-brainer that it was also my favorite found footage horror movie. There's not really much else I need to say about REC at this point. It's visceral, it's intense, it's claustrophobic, it's terrifying. Really, unless if you're into horror movies, unless you are really, really opposed to zombies, you should watch REC. Just give it a try. I know it's in Spanish. Just push through it. Do not settle and watch Quarantine. Please don't. Please don't. Stick with it and watch REC because, yeah, it's, in my mind, it's the best horror movie made so far. You could probably avoid the sequels, though. Although, I think REC 2 might be good, but I went into REC 2 with a bar very, very high. It was kind of like the Matrix to Matrix Reloaded. Like, there was no way that it could really handle the pressure. So maybe REC 2 is good, but REC 1, yes, it's a masterpiece. It's great. So not really a surprise there. Alright, so that's my top 10 found footage horror movies. I know I talked about that. I think top 10 videos are supposed to be shorter than this, but I like to talk a lot. So let me know what you thought of my list, what you would put on your list of found footage horror movies. Like I said, there aren't that many good ones out there, so I think I didn't look at any other people's top 10 found footage lists, but I feel like my list is probably not that different from theirs. Because there aren't that many great ones out there. But these are the ones that I thought were. Let me know about any other top 10 lists that you think I should do, because that is what I'm here for. My name is Mangg. This has been Top 10 Found Footage Horror Movies. I'll see you fine folks around.